All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Middle Colonies. At this point, we have learned about the New England colonies that are up in this region, and you should be able to look at this map and identify them: New Hampshire, Massachusetts, Connecticut, and Rhode Island. We've also discussed the southern colonies, which are Maryland, Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, and Georgia. At this point, we are going to move forward with the development of the English colonies here in the middle region. So let's do this. Follow along on the study guide or the viewing guide that is included on the attachment, and we'll get through it. Now, the middle colonies and their development is going to be essential to the big picture of having the English control the eastern seaboard of North America. And it starts off with the fact that the Dutch came here first, and they came to colonize in this region. And when they did, they established on the bottom half of the Hudson River that led into eventually the Atlantic, right off the tip of Manhattan Island. They built their new city called New Amsterdam, and were fairly successful in 1625, and it was really known for its incredible harbors on the Atlantic coast. They had zero religious purpose for being here. Their motivations were strictly about financial gain and money. And therefore, when they colonized again, they established Manhattan Island as exactly what it is today, kind of the financial hub of the world. And this is what it looks like today, or, well, nowadays. So, anyway, probably one of the coolest cities in the world. The Dutch had some success, but they didn't create any kind of opportunity for participation in governing. That wasn't what their purpose was, so they didn't have an elected body. They were extremely diverse. They had a lot of toleration, and they all got along. By the time the English actually got there, they had over 16 different languages. A lot of young families, but yet poor and lower class at times. And anyway, you can see where the problems lie. The New Englanders up here are, controlling this region of the eastern seaboard, and that makes the king happy. But the problem is, right in the middle of that, you have the Dutch, and they're kind of getting in the way of what the English want to do, which is to connect this colony region over here to the colonial region down here with the South. So they're a threat. They did settle in small numbers. They were able to be pushed out of the Netherlands, or they weren't being pushed out of the Netherlands, which made them fairly weak for colonizing because their own citizens would not come to the New World. They were, not wanting to leave the Netherlands. On the other hand, the English were great at colonizing because everybody wanted out. You had a lot of people being driven out because of lack of opportunity, religious problems, whatever. And therefore, the push-pull factors of each group were kind of set up as the British were a lot more pushed, whereas the people from the Netherlands were not really being pushed out at all. Yet America had a lot of pull factors that brought people here. Um, New York is born basically when in the middle of the 1600s, the English and the Dutch went to war with each other, and the king put his eyes on the Dutch colonies in America. And so the goal was to kind of close that gap between the New England colonies that lied in the north on the east coast, and then those that were in the south with the southern colonies. Um, Obviously, New Netherlands was to be taken, and therefore the king would send his brother, the Duke of York. And ultimately, the Duke of York was, sent over with a large fleet to kind of persuade the Dutch to give up the territory. And that would happen as he floated up to the harbor of Manhattan Island, and without even a fight or a shot being fired, he was able to take this city from the Dutch proprietor Stuyvesant. And Stuyvesant was willing to give up this claim, and he actually stayed in the city. And in 1664, New York becomes a British colony. Um, it prospered greatly, and that had a ton to do with the fact that it had incredible harbors. Even to this day, the harbors in New York City are above and beyond anywhere else. So, pretty awesome. In the meantime, the Duke had some buddies of his, and so they were given a large land grant in what we consider nowadays New Jersey. And those dudes pretty much were offered a chance to sell off the land, and they were trying to use this as a real estate venture. And they would develop a toleration charter that created a way to recruit people, because people wanted to go where religion was freely practiced and wouldn't affect them. And so these guys made a lot of money doing that, and eventually the king would buy back the colonies and turn them into a royal colony of New Jersey. And hopefully that kind of makes sense, in that New Jersey always kind of was seen as the stepchild of New York. But anyway, now you know that it was just a couple of buddies of the king. In the meantime, probably one of the most important colonies that gets developed is going to be Pennsylvania, under the leadership of this man, William Penn, the Quaker Oat guy. King Charles owed his father a huge debt, and William Penn was not very popular with the king because he was leading a group of radical Protestants known as Quakers. And essentially, his dad, out of embarrassment and also to try to make sure he saved his life, his son's life, gave him the land in America and said, "Hey, go do your thing, worship how you want, do what you do." And so he left England and took about 2,000 followers, and they headed to America. And they would establish one of the greatest cities in the New World at Philadelphia, and eventually it would be called the City of Brotherly Love. And Penn, again, was a radical Protestant. He believed in an inner light, and they focused on the Bible and the teachings of the Bible. Equality was key to everything that the Puritans, or the Quakers believed in. The Puritans were exact opposite, which is why they always fought each other. And for the most part, Penn created Pennsylvania as a very positive place. Pennsylvania would have success and continue to thrive through religious toleration and peace with the Native American people. It had fertile land, great rivers, just needed to have access to the ocean, and that was the only kicker that kept Pennsylvania from being the ultimate success. It did have great climates for growing grain. It would become the major cash crop and give the nickname of this region the breadbasket colonies. They were so successful that they multiplied to 18,000 inhabitants by 1700. Okay, so less than 20 years of being in existence, and they would have 18,000 inhabitants. That was pretty good. They absolutely had to have Delaware. If you look at where Delaware is on the map here, Pennsylvania and Philadelphia is up in here. Then you got New Jersey. They need to use this river to get to this waterway so they can get to the Atlantic to move all their grain products out. And so they had to lease the land from the Delaware people, and they pretty much ruled over both colonies over a period of time. And Delaware was kind of really just engulfed into Pennsylvania law, and that was all set up by William Penn. Delaware, in general, has its own story. It was actually set up by the Swedes. And even to this day, on their state capitol building, they have four flags: the Swedish flag, and then the Dutch, who took them over, and then the British flag, who then became a royal colony, and then after the Revolution, the Americans. It became part of the United States. Therefore, it has four governing bodies that were in control of it at some point in time in its history. And again, 1638, the Swedish traders founded the Delaware, and they established it only for money, and which is why they weren't able to hold back the Dutch. Once Stuyvesant tried taking it from them. And it was a hostile takeover in 1655. And then obviously when Stuyvesant gave up his claim to the New York and gave up the claim to basically the middle part of America to the Duke of York, he also lost control of Delaware. And eventually, again, it would be governed by Pennsylvania for access to the Atlantic. And so that is pretty much our story of the Middle Colonies. None of the colonies have as great a legacy as the New England colonies, but my hope is that in doing this and studying these, it'll make sense to you exactly just how much each one of these colonies has done to succeed and be prosperous. So hope you enjoyed, and that is our story about the Middle Colonies. New York, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Delaware. All right.